right? So in the last class, we have seen how to perform MAC spoofing for the Windows operating system. We use the application called TMAC, a freeware application which allows you to change the MAC address in multiple ways. One way, you can assign a random MAC address of your choice manually, or you can select the button random MAC to give you one random MAC from the tool itself, or you can select a vendor as well. These are the ways to spoof your MAC in the Windows operating system. Now, coming to the Kali Linux operating system, we have an inbuilt tool called Mac Changer itself. So Mac Changer is an inbuilt command line utility in Kali Linux, which can be used to spoof the MAC address of its interfaces. And it's completely command line based, guys. So you have to remember the syntax for it. Okay. Again, as mentioned, this tool is pre-installed, so you don't need to install anything separately. Most of the tools for Kali are pre-installed in it. So if I quickly start up my Kali operating system now, let me show you how to operate on that tool. I'll log in here with my root credentials because even Mac Changer requires admin privileges to run. So rather than you typing sudo every single time, it's better to log in with root user credentials itself. And now in the terminal, I can open up and search for Mac Changer. And if I want to learn about this command, guys, can anyone let me know what the option is to learn about other commands in Linux? We learned certain commands in the earlier sessions. If you want to learn about any other command in Linux, what do we type for that? Any answers? Benji, Charles, Vamsi. Yeah, man is one of them. You can type man and the command name. Any other alternatives as well? That's a correct answer, Benji. Yes, perfect. Hyphen, hyphen, help. So you can go back to the terminal and add hyphen, hyphen, help in the end. And this gives you a brief intro on the command line tool. So now when I hit enter, you can see it explains the syntax for it and the options available with the tool. Okay, so you got to type Mac changer and you specify a certain option and then you specify the device. Device is nothing but your interface. So if I type ifconfig, this is the device here, ETH0. Okay, so in order to change the MAC address for my Ethernet interface, I have to type Mac changer and any of these options required and then the ETH0 device. So if I want a random MAC address, I can use the option -R here, Mac changer -R as the option and device is ETH0. So if I type Mac changer -R for random MAC and ETH0, and if I hit enter, this will change my MAC address. But before it changes the MAC address, how do we check the original MAC? So if you notice in the ifconfig command itself, here, the MAC address is mentioned. It's under the value called ether. So right now, my Kali system's MAC address is 000C29ED0289. This is my existing MAC address. But now when I run this command, MAC changer -R ETH0, let's observe what happens to the MAC address. So when I hit enter, and if I type ifconfig, you can see now the new MAC address is 3A6674416D7. And that is the exact same MAC which I see over here. Okay, so this was my current MAC address from the vendor VMware, which is also my permanent MAC or my original MAC assigned from the vendor. And now this is my new MAC address over here. Okay, similarly, if I type ifconfig, oh, sorry, not ifconfig, if I type Mac changer -help again, and run another command. Let's say if I want to assign a MAC address of my choice rather than getting a MAC of a random MAC from the tool, I can go for the option -M. -M is to set the MAC address of your choice. So I can type Mac changer here, -M to specify my own MAC address. And now I can start typing the MAC address 0A, 1B, 2C, 3D, 4E, 5F. Let's see. And now when I hit enter, first I have to add the interface ETH0. And now when I hit enter, you can notice this is the newly assigned MAC address. So if I type ifconfig, that's the new MAC 0A1B2C3D4D5F. Okay. And if I had to reset my Mac to the original value, can you let me know what is the option for that, guys, from hyphen help? So which option here would allow us to get our original MAC address back or reset our MAC address to the original one? Any answers? I want my original MAC address back. So what option can I use here to get that out of all the options mentioned here? Which option will allow us to get me my original MAC address back? You can read through the options, guys. Yes, correct answer, Benji. So as Benji has mentioned in the chat box, it's hyphen P for resetting it to the original MAC address. So now when I type MAC changer, hyphen P for permanent or original MAC, and then if I type ETH0, now you notice I've got my original MAC address back. So my permanent MAC is 000C29 something, and that's the same MAC which is represented here, if you notice. So that's the original MAC address for my system. So these are the commands that are available for you in the MAC changer tool to change your MAC address for Kali operating system. So to learn about MAC changer, you can always use the hyphen help option. Okay. So I've mentioned the syntaxes here for each of the commands as well. Okay. Is that clear? Any questions up to this point? Anyone? Charles, Vamsi, Benji. Okay. Charles, any questions on your end? Oh, Benji, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it is persistent. Once you change the Mac with Mac changer, even if you restart it, the newly modified Mac is what is going to be present. It doesn't reset with the restart. Right. Right. Moving forward now. Yep. This concludes the Mac spoofing part and the IP spoofing part. There's nothing further for this session about Mac or IP spoofing. Here we progress into the next topic now, which is called information gathering. Just give me 1 minute, guys. Let me get some water quickly. Sorry. Okay, apologies about that. So now, as mentioned, guys, we'll be going to the next topic called information gathering today. So we're going to talk about it theoretically today, and tomorrow we perform the practicals on it. So when you talk about information gathering, the main objective here of information gathering is to collect all vital information or as much vital information as possible about your target organization or your target. And an important point to note here is all of this information is obtained from passive methods. What I mean by passive methods is you do not contact the organization in any way. And all of this data is obtained from various publicly available resources, which is from the internet. So from other websites on the internet, you get information regarding your target domain. So for example, if it's an organization like Netflix.com or Tesla.com or Wipro.com or whatever company it is, you try to obtain information about that organization from other third-party websites on the internet. Okay. Now, this step, information gathering, can also be referred to as reconnaissance or footprinting. So no matter what words you use, information gathering, reconnaissance, or footprinting, it means one and the same task. Okay, trying to get as much information as possible about your target organization from passive methods. Now, the main question that arises here is what kind of information are we looking for? And these are the pieces of information. Oh, 1 second. Yeah, Charles. Now I can. Yes, there is. So that's the next step. Scanning is the active method where you make direct connections with the target organization and retrieve some extra info. Okay, but first we perform information gathering passively, and then we go into the active methods. No worries. Right. So when you talk about information gathering, getting info passively, this is the again the kind of information you look out for. IP addresses belong to the target DNS records. So the information from the DNS servers of the organization, whose information, which is like basically getting to know who is hosting the website for them, then the domains and subdomains of the organization, and the operating system information. What OS are they running their servers on? Are they running it on Windows servers? Are they running it on Linux servers? Okay. Then the phone numbers of the employees, the email address of the employees. Believe it or not, all of this information is readily available on the internet. All you need to know is what those websites are from where you can retrieve this information. Okay. Now, before we get into that practical part, there are some important conditions to know for information gathering. First things first, we need to know what an ROE document is. Okay. So basically, when you perform information gathering, the company might set certain boundaries, might set certain limitations. Okay. And those limitations and boundaries are clearly mentioned in a document called the ROE document. Okay. And that ROE document defines the scope of pen test. Okay. The scope of a penetration test refers to the defined boundaries and limitations of the testing activity. Now, the scope is also referred to as a rules of engagement document, ROE document. Okay, so this clearly mentions what are the factors that are supposed to be included in a scope and excluded in a scope. Okay, so there's four important factors to note: assets in scope, assets out of scope, vulnerabilities in scope, and vulnerabilities out of scope. So these are four important factors that you have to always look out for. Assets in scope means what devices, what applications, or what websites or what domains you're supposed to test. Assets out of scope means what devices, what domains you're supposed to not test. Okay, to prevent any operational disruption or downtime, you're not allowed to test these certain domains or certain devices. Okay, so they prevent you from performing testing on them. So it is very important that when they tell you something is out of scope, you have to prevent yourself from performing any scanning or any attacks on such services or such domains or devices. Then you have vulnerabilities in scope. Then the company tells you that you're supposed to find only certain vulnerabilities on that organization's domains. And then those are included in vulnerabilities in scope. And then there are certain vulnerabilities that the company tells you do not find those. So even if you find those, you're not supposed to report. Okay. So again, the company might have allowed some other pen tester or might have given that task to some other third-party client to find such vulnerabilities. So they might tell you, do not test these vulnerabilities yourself. Okay. So these are the four important factors: assets which are supposed to be tested, which are called as assets in scope; assets which are not supposed to be tested, which are called assets out of scope; vulnerabilities which are supposed to be found, which are included in vulnerabilities in scope; and vulnerabilities you're not supposed to find, which are mentioned out of scope. If I show you this practically, you can go to any bug bounty platform. So if you go to your browser, in your browser, you have websites like, I mean, on the internet, you have websites like Bugcrowd or Integrity or whatnot. So all of these are bug bounty platforms. Basically, all the companies host their website here and they ask pen testers to find vulnerabilities on them. So if I go to engagements here, In engagements now, you can notice there's multiple companies listed out here. Electronium, Wise, CyberGhost, Credit Karma, iRobot, Intercom, Monash University, Rapid. So these are some very popular companies that are available on the internet. So again, the other day, I think I saw Tesla as well, Tesla or Netflix. So there's Dell Technologies, now on T-Mobile, MasterCard. And you can notice they're paying a certain amount of money for every vulnerability that is found. Depending on the impact or the severity of the vulnerability, the amount might differ. Okay. So again, similarly, if I go to one more page, I saw Netflix, there's Indeed. No, there's Tesla here. You can notice there's Tesla. So you can find a lot of popular websites mentioned here. Tesla, ExpressVPN, Dell Technologies, Who Network, Asana, Kalido, Pinterest, Western Union, Newfold, okay, whatnot. Now, as mentioned earlier, guys, there's Opera browser as well, Unity Technologies. I think they've removed Netflix from here, but the other day I also saw Netflix as well, basically. But yeah, again, as mentioned, these are all the websites that are listed out here. And no matter what website you open up here, you can see there's something called terms and conditions and rules of engagement, where they specifically tell you what are the conditions that you have to follow when you start performing pen testing for this organization. So the scope specifies what are supposed to be tested. So in the scope, you can see these are the domains you're allowed to perform information gathering on or scanning on or testing on. So these are all allowed. Okay, so these are the websites you can find vulnerabilities on. If you scroll down much further, you will find some vulnerabilities as well. So they are regarding the vulnerabilities according to the category. So critical vulnerabilities, if found, will be awarded this much this much money. High, moderate, and low vulnerabilities as well. And then there's something called out of scope. So these domains are not supposed to be tested. You're not supposed to find any vulnerabilities on these subdomains or domains of Tesla. Okay. And there's also something called as out of scope vulnerabilities. So these vulnerabilities found will not be regarded as a reward point. So you will not be rewarded anything for finding any vulnerabilities which are mentioned out over here. Okay. So this, as mentioned, guys, is the scope of pen testing, telling you what you're supposed to test, what you're not supposed to test. Again, what vulnerabilities you're supposed to find and what vulnerabilities you're not supposed to find. So that's an important documentation to go through, guys. If you do perform a test on something which was not supposed to be performed test on, you will be held legally responsible. Okay, so they can take a legal action against you and again cause you a lot of trouble later on. So it's very important to always go through the scope before performing pen testing. Exactly, everyone. Charles, Benji, Vamsi, right. Now, a very commonly asked question among students is, do we always have to go with information gathering first, or can we skip this step? So that depends on the type of pen testing, guys. So again, there are three main types of pen testing. There's something called as white box testing, gray box testing, and black box pen testing. Okay. White box pen testing is where everything is very transparent. So in this method, there is complete transparency maintained between the penetration tester and the client. So whatever information is required, the client organization can provide that information freely to the pen tester. They can provide a report with all the information requested by the pen tester. In such a scenario, since it is being given to you or handed over to you in the format of a report, you don't need to perform information gathering again separately. All that information is readily provided to you. So in white box pen testing, you can completely ignore information gathering and start with the next phase called scanning or active reconnaissance. Okay. Now, this is only a case where the pen tester belongs to the organization. If he's from an external or a third party pen tester, the company might not be trusting him that much. And therefore, there are cases of gray box and black box. In gray box pen testing, only partial or limited information is shared with the pen tester. In such a scenario, the remaining information has to be gathered by the pen tester from other third party websites or reconnaissance websites. Okay. And in black box pen testing, the pen tester has no prior knowledge of the target client. So no information is provided at all. And the pen tester must use the same techniques like a hacker and try to find vulnerabilities and try to find the information to gain access to the system. So when you perform bug bounty here, the only information you get is the domains you're supposed to test. And from those domains itself, you find the rest of the information like a hacker. So that is black box testing. Okay. And we're going to learn the whole procedure with the methodology of black box testing itself. How do you get information or complete information from the target organization just by their domain name? And to perform that, we need the reconnaissance websites. So what I've done is over the years, whatever websites I've found useful, I've filtered them out and I've put them here in one single slide. So these are the most commonly used websites by any penetration tester in the world. Okay. So again, the 10. Yeah, go ahead, Jack. Yes. Mhm. Yes. No, the only thing they'll provide you is just the domain name. So if you take this example here, Charles. So again, if you notice this bug cloud website as well, the only information they're giving you is what domains you're supposed to test. So from those domain names, you find the rest of the information required. And I've mentioned already what information you're supposed to find. If I go back a couple or a few previous slides ago, I've mentioned, right? So this is the information you're supposed to find. IP addresses, DNS records, whose info, subdomains, operating system info, phone numbers, and email addresses. This is all the information required to be obtained from information gathering procedure, or again, reconnaissance. Is that clear? Right. So again, as mentioned, guys, we are supposed to start the practical part, but again, we won't be having sufficient time to cover all the websites. Okay. But at least let me show you one website today, and the remaining nine will be covering it in the next class. Okay. So the first website that I want to show you today is centralops.net. Okay. So when you talk about Central Ops, this is a website which is used to give you the whose information, the IP address information, and the DNR information as well. So if I search for my website here, Central Ops, you can click on the first link provided, centralops.net. And now, if one common thing you would notice on all of these websites is you would have an input field as such, where you can enter your target domain or your target's IP address. So, for example, if my target is tesla.com, I can copy that same domain and paste it over here, tesla.com. And now when I click on go, this starts providing me information regarding the IP addresses of Tesla, all the IPs belonging to tesla.com, and its who's information, giving us information on who's hosting the website of Tesla. So these are all the web servers that belong to Tesla, guys. So around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 servers are there all around the world, which are hosting Tesla for us. Okay. And these IP addresses are very crucial for a hacker or an ethical hacker in the upcoming phases. So when you want to attack the Tesla's organization, these are the IPs you would send the packets on. So these IPs are supposed to be noted down. Okay, so if you notice, all of these are public IPs which belong on the internet. They are public facing devices which are hosting the website tesla.com for the organization. So your job as a pen tester is to note down these IPs and perform active reconnaissance on these IPs later on. But again, as mentioned, to connect on Tesla, you need to know what IPs belong to Tesla. And that information, you're getting it from centralops.net. Okay. So this website firstly gives you all the IP addresses belonging to the main domain tesla.com. Scroll down much further and it tells you who's hosting Tesla for them. So there are companies on the internet called DNRs, domain name registrars. So websites like GoDaddy, BigRock, HostGator, all of these hosting all of these websites are basically DNRs. What they do is they host your website for you. Okay. Hosting Namecheap, Wix, Shopify, all of them host a website for you. So there you can register your domain name along with them. So if I want to search for a domain, let's say shoaibcybersec.com. So if I want to host it, if I want to host my website as such, I can search for this domain now. And if it is available, I can purchase that domain. I can register that domain in my name. So this domain seems to be available and I can purchase it for the first year for $0.01 is what it says. Okay. Now, when I register for this domain, this domain gets registered on a database called the Whois database. So on the internet, there's a database called Whois database, which maintains a record of every website that is hosted till date. And from that Whois database, you're getting this information, as you can see, Whois database. So that from that database, we're getting to know that Tesla.com is being hosted by a company called MarkMonitor. So the DNR domain name registrar is markmonitor.com. Okay. And this domain was created in 1992. It was last updated in 2022, and this expires in 2024. So after 2024, this MarkMonitor can be hosting Tesla, or Tesla can shift their DNR as well. We never know. Okay. But for now, up to 2024, the DNR is MarkMonitor itself. Now you might have a question. Why is this information relevant for a hacker? Why does he need to know who's hosting the website for them? Now, one important point to note is whenever you're hosting a website with such companies, the configurations for hosting these websites are pretty similar. So they just copy paste the configuration from one website to the other website, because you having a different configuration, or a unique configuration for each website hosted is a very hectic task, because there are millions and millions of websites hosted every single day by a certain DNR. So what they usually do is they again host it on the same server or multiple servers, and they copy paste the configuration. Now, as a pen tester, if you did find the vulnerability earlier in the past with any certain website hosted by a certain DNR, there's a very high risk that that same vulnerability could exist on the other websites hosted by the same DNR again. So let's say if there's netflix.com. So Netflix is also being hosted by MarkMonitor itself. If I checked the other day, I remember netflix.com was also hosted by MarkMonitor, if you notice. So in the past, if you did find any vulnerability with Netflix, there's a very high chance that Tesla also could contain the same vulnerabilities. Okay. So again, you can figure out what that vulnerability is, and you can try to attack with the same vulnerability on all the other domains hosted by the same DNR MarkMonitor. Okay. So that DNR information is relevant to you in this certain way. Okay. If you know certain vulnerability is existing on a certain website from a certain DNR, there's a very high chance, a very high risk that the other domains hosted by the same DNR could also contain the same vulnerabilities. Okay. So that is how this DNR information is important for you. But the most important takeaway from this website is the IP address, guys, getting the exact IPs of the server belonging to netflix.com. So these are IPv4 addresses, and their IPv6 addresses as well. Not so important for now, guys. Let's just focus on IPv4. Okay. So this is what Central Ops can give you, guys. IP address information, registrant information, whose records. Okay. Similarly, there's tons and tons of other websites where you can get much more relevant information as well. And we'll talk about those in the next session. DNS Dumpster, You Get Signal, Shodan.io, Hunter.io, Netcraft, Google Database, Wayback Machine, CV Details, ExploitDB. We'll cover all these websites in the next session, guys. Okay. Is that clear? Any questions, any doubts up to this point? So it's going to get a lot more interesting from here on, guys. It's going to get a lot more practical from here on. So yeah, let's see how this goes. Any questions up to this point? Benji, Vamsi, Charles. Okay. Vamsi, any questions on your end? Oh, Vamsi, I'm going to give you a quick call after the class. Okay. Mm-hmm.